My name is Madison Franklin, 31, Seattle-born and startup bred, and I can still taste the sugary burn of the caramel latte that was sliding across my tongue the moment my grandfather lobbed the single sentence capable of detonating an entire family. Yet that explosion is still a few hours away. And right now, the city's Thanksgiving dawn is shaking drizzle onto my windshield as I barrel toward Northwood Pines, the senior facility I have only ever viewed in polished marketing photos. My mother texts me when she wants to prove how much she cares. I'm gripping the wheel too tight, wondering whether the man who taught me the smell of fresh-cut cedar will even recognize me. And at the next intersection, the light flicks from amber to red with an audible click that somehow feels like fate cocking its hammer. Northwood Pines looks serene cedar siding, manicured rhododendrons, an American flag snapping briskly in the damp wind. Yet the moment the automatic doors hiss apart, antiseptic air and the distant rattle of pill carts slap me with guilt so dense it feels like humidity. Then I spot him. Robert Franklin, smart navy cardigan, eyes alert and genuinely happy as he leans on a carved cane he probably whittled himself, and while the nurse hunts for my signature on a clipboard, he whispers, "Thought you'd forgotten the old man," with a wink so mischievous it almost splits my heart, because in that second I realize he is not the doddering husk my parents described, but the same steady pillar who once watched my first line of JavaScript scroll like black magic across a clunky CRT monitor. I hustle him through the rain to my Model Y, promise a proper holiday, and he hums Sinatra all the way to Shoreline while I rehearse apologies I'm too ashamed to speak. The house still smells like cinnamon clove potpourri and overly ambitious real estate dreams. Mom Evelyn meets us at the door with a smile stretched so tight it trembles at the corners. Dad Daniel materializes behind her, holding the carving knife as though it's a scalpel-sized scepter. And my older brother Tyler sprawls on the sectional, jersey half-tucked, ESPN commentary pouring from the TV. Everything looks maddeningly normal until Grandpa sets his water glass down, clears his throat, and beams at me as if I'm 8 again. "Maddie, you enjoying that 200,000 cushion I left you? And tell me, does the lake house glow this pretty in fall?" Silence drops like a blackout grenade. The silver fork slips from my grip, clatters once, and Mom bolts toward the kitchen shrieking about forgotten pumpkin pies, while Dad lowers his eyes to the bird, sawing breast meat into surgical squares. Tyler's jaw pulses, but he will not look up because, of course, I have never seen a dime, and the only house by Lake Chelan I know is a blurred memory from childhood postcards. Yet no one answers the old man. And in their strangled quiet, I recognize betrayal wearing the faces that raised me. A realization so cold, it throttles my lungs and forces me to inhale through my teeth, promising I will uncover every lie they just failed to bury. Dinner disintegrates into forced laughter and clinking cutlery. Yet, beneath the civility, my pulse is a kettle drum. When I steer Grandpa back to Northwood Pines under a moon, the color of steel, he dozes, content, while my mind replays another screen 15 months earlier. A Singapore hotel room, my phone vibrating with a family emergency Zoom. The Series B investors queued outside my door. Mom's voice coated in syrupy dread. "It's just a precaution. Sweetie, the doctors need you to sign durable power of attorney," and I, half asleep, half terrified my deal would collapse, scribbled an electronic signature that effectively weaponized my own trust against me. Realization whips through me like acid, and I pull to the curb, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles bleach as white as the forms I never read. Back downtown, I stumble into Sarah Johnson's minimalist apartment, shoes dripping sleet onto her hardwood, and spill every detail the missing inheritance. My parents' charade, the POA that could only have enabled this heist. Sarah, all sharp cheekbones and zero sugarcoating, listens, then slices through my self-pity with one surgical question. Are you fighting for him? Or flogging yourself for going AWOL these last 2 years? The words land like a slap. I have no answer, only the cavernous echo of missed birthdays, unread voicemails, unopened Christmas cards, and the sudden certainty that my absence made me an accomplice. Yet Sarah's challenge also sparks a savage clarity if neglect built this cage. Then action will tear it down, whatever the collateral cost. Rain claws at her windows as I pace, and memory sluices through me basement. Age 15. Grandpa crouched on a stool beside my beige Dell tower, mug of cocoa steaming between us. Nobody else in that house understood binary. But he watched green text bloom on the screen and called it future gold affirmation that anchored every sleepless hackathon that followed. Now the future he believed in has arrived, and I've let grifters with my last name shackle him in a pastel-painted facility for profit. Rage ignites. Not the wildfire kind, but a focused, blue core burn, and somewhere between Sarah's steady gaze and the hiss of espresso from her machine, a plan assembles itself like code compiling. Step 1. Verify Grandpa's competence. Step 2. Expose the money trail. Step 3. Confront them on the very soil they stole, each step clicking into place with the mechanical inevitability of a falling row of dominoes. And though I do not yet see how the final piece will land, I know the cascade has already begun. The next morning breaks slate gray over Puget Sound, and while most of Seattle is still arguing with snooze buttons, I'm already on the freeway. Grandfather beside me, destination a private geriatrician whose earliest slot I bribed into existence. Dr. Patel's bungalow office smells like eucalyptus and printer toner. And for a full hour, she quizzes Robert on everything from the capital of Iceland to the square root of 8001. Then checks reflexes, motor skills, the works, each correct answer, pistons fresh adrenaline through my veins until, at last, she signs the cognitive capacity form with a satisfying click of fountain pen, an inked seal that declares my grandfather decisively competent, which means the entire he's slipping narrative my parents fed me is, medically speaking, garbage. Yet the paper alone is useless without proof of motive. So as I escort Robert back into the drizzle, I'm already scrolling to the contact Sarah dug up last night, a retired city cop named Frank Daniels, famed for turning missing pet jobs into embezzlement busts, and while the call rings, I feel gears inside me lock into a harsher, colder alignment, the point where rescue mutates into retribution. Daniels moves fast by the time I finish late lunch with Robert at a pierside clam chowder shack. He has bank routing numbers traced, a USPS P.O. Box application in Westbrook photocopied, and grainy ATM footage of my father withdrawing $2,000 on the dot every first of the month. He delivers it all from the driver's seat of a dented Crown Vic that smells of old leather and black coffee. And his blunt assessment, "This ain't sloppy panic, kid. This is a plan," lands heavier than any insult, because it confirms what I dreaded. Daniel Franklin, CPA by trade, cooked a system so meticulous the auditors inside my own head almost applaud its symmetry. And somewhere in that admiration, I discover fresh waves of fury, because the elegance proves intent, and intent means they looked at a living, breathing patriarch and calculated his value down to the dollar sign. I wire Daniels a retainer that could buy a mid-size sedan, then phone Noah Reyes, the VC with forensic hobbies. And within hours, his analysts dump a spreadsheet showing a nonprofit called Kitchen Love for Seniors, receiving mysterious PayPal infusions matching the phantom withdrawals. Evelyn's cheerful cooking blog is laundering my inheritance one casserole recipe at a time. A fact so grotesque, I almost laugh. But the sound sticks halfway up my throat, transforming into a vow that their next dinner will taste only of ashes. Momentum, however, slices both ways. 2 days later, the Apex Pay Board corrals me into a glass conference room where panoramic views of Elliott Bay do nothing to soften the blunt ultimatum finish the Series C roadshow, or step down as CEO. Mark, my co-founder, looks equal parts angry and terrified. Sarah maintains eye contact that says, "I warned you," and Tiger Strive's lead partner taps his Mont Blanc against his notebook like a slow-ticking bomb. I promise them a revised deck by Sunday. But my pulse is drumming Morse code for liar, because I know every neuron I possess is wired toward Christmas Eve. The deadline stamped on a purchase agreement Daniel's just uncovered. Tyler has negotiated the sale of the lake house to Lakeside Resort for a cool $950,000 cash, closing at $23.59 on December 24th, meaning the property could vanish into corporate hands while carolers are still hunting the high note of Silent Night. And the board's threat suddenly feels like background music compared to a clock that will erase my childhood sanctuary unless I remove my family from it first. I leave the meeting with my title intact, but only because no one sees the tremor in my fingers as I slide the door shut. A tremor that says even a career I bled for may be acceptable collateral. Night after night, the plan accretes details. Sarah scripts a real-time data vault demo that will buy me goodwill with investors. Noah secures cloud storage for Daniels' evidence. Triple encrypted, Haley Kim, the whistleblowing nurse, agrees to wear a body cam when she confronts Northwood Pines administrator about forged dementia charts. George Ramirez, grizzled, PTSD haunted, teaches me to pilot his drone under moonlight so I, not he, can capture the final visual of Tyler siphoning heirloom wine into that ridiculous lifted truck. Each ally brings skills, but they also bring mirrors. Every conversation forces me to witness a different slice of my own obsession. And one rain-slick midnight, I walk onto the office rooftop, pitch deck in hand, watching sheets of water erase the city skyline, imagining the investors slipping through my fingers the same way. And I actually consider quitting the fight, accepting that some stories end in shattered trust and a polite legal settlement. But then my phone vibrates with a clip from Daniel's Tyler entering a notary's office, glancing over his shoulder like a B-movie villain, forging my signature on a deed transfer while my parents grin in the background. And any notion of surrender dies right there among the puddles, because the sight of that pen stroke feels like a knife carving my own name off the family tree. And I realize the only way to reclaim it is by pruning the poisoned branches, no matter who bleeds. December 22nd. 2 days before deadline, Dr. Patel's capacity report. Bank records, body cam audio, drone footage, deed video, all packaged in a secure drive labeled Operation Evergreen. Couriered to District Attorney Caroline Brooks, whose re-election campaign just plastered billboards promising to crack down on elder abuse. She calls me at 9 p.m. Oh, voice calm but hungry. Informs me she has secured a search warrant and a temporary restraining order, freezing every Franklin asset, provided I guarantee public-facing proof to silence any claim of political theater. And I tell her she'll have it on live stream, even as a small voice in my gut asks what happens when revenge requires turning one's own blood into internet spectacle. That voice is timid but persistent, and for a heartbeat, I hesitate at the moral precipice. Yet the image of Grandpa laughing at the smell of cedar overrides everything. And I whisper into the phone that Christmas Eve will be her stage, promising a performance the voters and my family will never forget. Because sometimes justice needs floodlights. And sometimes the only way to cleanse rot is to drag it into the cold winter air and let the world watch it squirm. Christmas Eve detonates under a sky the color of liquid pewter. Lake Chelan, a sheet of dark glass reflecting the low-slung moon, as George and I guide his battered SUV up the winding drive toward the house that by law still bears my grandfather's name. From the crest of the hill, we see fairy-like garlands blinking across the porch and silhouettes clinking champagne flutes. Evelyn is live-streaming her Kitchen Love charity gala. Daniel hovers beside a tablet registering PayPal donations, and Tyler's gaudy truck squats near the garage, bed packed with sealed crates bearing the Lakeside Resort logo, ready for transport once the deed transfers at midnight. Yet none of them know that two unmarked cruisers, lights off, idle a quarter-mile down the slope where D.A. Brooks briefs her deputies and affixes tiny body mics that will broadcast every syllable to Kylie Harper's phone for the million-plus viewers already flooding her pre-stream chat, which means every secret tonight is about to become public record. I steady the drone controller, thumb sweating against the joystick, snap a wide aerial shot showing the party's smug serenity, then exhale and text Sarah the code phrase, evergreen lights, prompting her to push a timed post across Apex Pay's official feed. Watch live at 2100 for a lesson in financial fraud, a bit of corporate theater that will buy me goodwill with investors by proving the CEO's ethics in real time, but also ensures there is no way to soft pedal what's coming. A fact that chills me more than the December air as I step out and feel the crunch of frost beneath my boots. Heart pounding to a baseline that will not slow because every step forward is a step deeper into a point of no return. 9:30 sharp, Kylie's rig lights my face in LED white while I lead Robert across the threshold. Inside, warmth slaps us, fireplace crackle, cinnamon, overpriced Merlot, and the music dies mid-chorus as our presence registers. Evelyn's phone wobbles on its tripod, stream audience surging with confused emojis, and Daniel's carving knife stills above a prime rib roast as if he's petrified in amber. Yet it's Tyler who reacts first, shoulders bunching like a linebacker, because he knows that if I'm here early, the Lakeside contract is already in peril. A thought that flickers across his eyes before he pastes on a smirk and says, "Mads, you could have RSVP'd." To which I reply by projecting drone footage on the 80-inch TV Tyler lugging crates, Daniel pocketing bank envelopes, Evelyn receiving a suspicious glittering envelope from the nursing home administrator, and the room's color washes out as though someone sucked the saturation from reality. But before anyone can scramble for excuses, I cue the second file, the notary video of Tyler forging my signature. Frame paused on the exact instant the pen touches paper. A still image that even a stranger could identify in a lineup, and over my shoulder I can hear Kylie whisper, "We're peaking 800K live," which lands like a drum roll just as Brooks steps through the door. Warrant in hand, deputies fanning out to secure evidence, their polished boots thudding on hardwood so loudly it seems time itself has switched to a louder metronome. Daniel tries to lawyer-speak his way into a delay, citing family misunderstanding. But Haley, summoned from the wings, produces the falsified medical chart's dementia codes overwritten in Evelyn's handwriting, and Brooks recites the statute numbers for elder financial exploitation, while her team photographs every bottle of vintage wine as potential stolen property. Evelyn's mascara smears into raccoon swirls as she wails about protecting Tyler's fragile future. Yet her sobs crack when Robert, voice soft as sanded pine, asks, "Was my fragility worth this carnival?" And the moral weight of the question makes the deputies pause, air humming with tension that feels like the moment before thunder, until Tyler explodes, pointing at me with a shaking finger. He loved her more, always her. We were just placeholders, a confession both pathetic and self-incriminating, shouted directly into Kylie's streaming mic. And in the digital ether, 100,000 viewers spam rolling text, "Guilty," while Brooks quietly nods to her sergeant. Chains clink. Cuffs cinch Tyler's wrists. And somewhere deep in me a knot loosens, but another immediately tightens, because vengeance is never as light as you imagine it will be. Yet the climax still lurks, 11:47 p.m. Daniels hacks the escrow firm's fax line and transmits the restraining order, freezing the sale. Evelyn snatches her phone, frantic lipstick-smeared fingers trying to reach the resort rep. But every call routes to voicemail because Albright filed notice with their counsel 30 minutes ago, outside. Snow starts to fall in fat, slow flakes that mute the siren now approaching up the drive to transport evidence. and his deputies catalog an antique cedar chest. We all remember Robert built by hand in 1959, the chest Grandpa once promised would be mine on wedding day. I catch Daniel staring at it with haunted regret. Yet even that pang cannot erase the ledger of choices he logged against his own father, choices that slide now into official inventory bags, while viewers type lock them up in languages I cannot read. The arrest van doors slam. Wind gusts down the chimney, blowing sparks onto the slate hearth. And for a breath, I fear the room will catch fire. But the embers die, leaving only smoke curling into the rafters, like the last whisper of our former family. And I realize Kylie is asking how I feel. Red light blinking. Audience demand insatiable. Yet all I can do is squeeze Robert's hand and answer with a tight smile. Because feeling is a luxury I have postponed until the paperwork is done and the cameras click off. Midnight strikes. Municipal bells echo across the lake while deputies escort my parents, cuffed but silent, past a row of stunned holiday guests who'd thought they were attending a philanthropic soiree. One woman shivers, clutches her faux fur coat, and whispers, "Can this be real?" A question echoed by 500,000 commenters. But the hand-inked warrant Brooks waves as she climbs the porch stairs is very real. As is the chain of custody she signs before loading the last crate into evidence. And as taillights fade down the drive, I feel the first true silence of the night settle over the empty house, broken only by the cracking log in the fireplace and Robert's steady breathing beside me. Yet even in that hush, a fresh awareness blooms: restitution, trials, board meetings, investor calls, a foundation to launch whole lifetimes of consequences, waiting just beyond the tree line, already rustling in the snowfall. I tuck Grandpa's scarf tighter, lead him to the reclaimed cedar armchair by the window, the one piece I will let him keep from this tainted lodge, snowflakes haloing the glass as he lowers himself. And for the first time, he looks old. Not because of infirmity, but because of the vast field of emotional wreckage he now surveys. He pats the armrest, bids me sit on the rug like when I was a code-loving teenager. And in that posture, time folds. The embers glow gold on his cardigan buttons, and he murmurs, "You've given me a better Christmas than I deserved." Words that detonate guilt deeper than any legal doubt. Because I recall every missed Sunday call, every text I flagged, reply later, then forgot. Yet before remorse can drown the room, he closes his eyes, squeezes my fingers, and whispers, "Now write the next chapter kinder," a benediction that lands heavier than a sentence, yet lighter than forgiveness. I swallow hard, nod once, and stand, pulling out my phone to draft a board update email. Because dawn is 5 hours away, and the world will soon ask what Apex Pay's comeback looks like. But as I type, I glance at Robert, asleep in the chair, snowglow painting him silver, and I know that whatever the company demands, the foundation we build tomorrow must honor the lesson tonight, carved into both our lives. Justice isn't a destination, it's maintenance. And while I press send, I also press record on a fresh voice memo titled Franklin Trust Mission Statement, my own voice trembling as I outline pro bono services for seniors, a digital seed dropping into cold soil. Yet I sense it will sprout when the sun rises, and that promise for him, for me, propels me toward the hall to gather our coats. Because the house no longer feels like home. And the night isn't finished teaching us how to leave. Morning arrives like a verdict, sky a sterile hospital blue, inbox humming with repercussions, and by the time I guide Robert through my apartment door, the news cycle has detonated. Seattle heiress live streams family fraud, kitchen love charity scam exposed, Apex Pay CEO leads Christmas Eve sting, Investors who ghosted me in November now bombard my phone with congratulatory emojis. But Mark's text is the only one that matters. Board meets 4 p.m. Everyone expects miracle numbers. I've slept 90 minutes, yet adrenaline still throbs where fatigue should be. So while Robert naps on the sofa, I hammer together a 12-slide deck that weaves the sting operation into brand narrative integrity at scale. How Apex Pay protects seniors. And I lace it with Haley's anonymized data set, proving elder abuse payments spiked 14% during the pandemic. The argument lands so clean, even I almost believe I orchestrated last night for corporate comms rather than blood-level justice. And that moral dissonance buzzes like faulty wiring under my ribs as I button a blazer and head for headquarters, wondering if virtue exploited for ROI can still count as virtue at all. A question that sticks like a burr as the elevator doors close on my reflection. The boardroom smells of citrus cleaner and cautious optimism. Tiger Strive's partner taps his Mont Blanc again, but this time in applause. Sarah nods approval. Mark grins the grin of a man whose IPO roadmap just grew rocket boosters. And the vote to reaffirm my CEO seat is unanimous, yet victory tastes metallic, because my next stop is the courthouse, where Brooks files felony information against my parents and brother. And I must swear deposition testimony under oath. In the hallway, Tyler is being led past in orange scrubs, his gaze hollow, yet still carrying the same plea for validation that fueled the crime. But bailiffs keep us 6 feet apart. So the only acknowledgement we share is a fractured second of eye contact before he disappears into a steel-barred elevator. And the clang of its gate slices any residual pity into ribbons that drift around my ankles as I sign page after page of legal documents whose footers read State of Washington versus Franklin et al. Each signature a stitch sealing the family wound shut, but also tattooing it forever. A permanence I can feel even through the thin courthouse pen. Weeks unspool in procedural blur, forensic accountants tally restitution. Realtors list the shoreline house. IRS agents subpoena kitchen loves PayPal. Mom writes me letters thick with half apologies and full justifications. But I forward them to Albright unopened. Late nights find me and Robert hunched over the dining table, drafting bylaws for the Franklin Trust for Senior Justice, a nonprofit that will convert 70% of the lake house sale into pro bono legal representation. And while the ink dries on our 501c3 paperwork, Robert admits he never imagined his carpentry pension would seed a fund larger than his lifetime earnings. Confession quivering between pride and sorrow. And I sense he finally comprehends the scale of both the theft and the restitution. Yet before I can comfort him, the doorbell rings George, delivering a reclaimed plank of Chelan cedar for the foundation's first office sign, its grain glowing like forgiveness trapped in wood, hinting that spaces once poisoned can be sanded into something new. A promise we choose to believe as we heft it onto sawhorses and ready the varnish. February 15th, Sentencing Day. The courtroom ceiling fans spin lazy circles above bleary reporters. Daniel and Evelyn plead guilty to reduced counts, receive 5 years probation, 2 500 hours community service, full financial restitution. Tyler's lawyer argues gambling addiction and filial pressure, landing him 18 months suspended plus mandatory rehab. The gavel lands, and my parents turn, eyes wet, but bailiffs usher them toward the side door before apology can form. Which is mercy, because I'm not sure I could shoulder it still. As they vanish, an unexpected ache blooms, the phantom pain of an amputated limb, and I suddenly grasp that justice corrects imbalance, but cannot regrow what was cut away. A realization that steals my breath even while reporters shove mics in my face, demanding sound bites. And I manage only. The system worked. Now we rebuild. A statement that feels both true and hollow. Setting up the next question. No journalist will ask, what does rebuilding actually look like when the blueprints themselves are ash? Spring cracks open, cherry blossoms flaring down Pike Street, and Apex Pay closes Series C at $42 million on a valuation that makes headlines. Still, each triumph is shadowed by envelopes from the restitution escrow, monthly checks funding the trust, tangible reminders that my success is underwritten by the very people who tried to erase me. So the money never lingers. It funnels straight into elder law clinics, into Haley's outreach program, into George's drone-based monitoring service for rural seniors. Purpose becomes solvent that dissolves the moral residue. But on nights when insomnia prowls, I scroll the trust's case files and count how many perpetrators share their surname with their victims. A statistic that never dips below 60%. And I wonder whether our species will ever outgrow the impulse to cannibalize its own kin. A question that propels me back to work each dawn, yet also keeps sleep evasive. Because solutions feel urgent and impossibly slow in equal measure. June 2nd. Ribbon cutting of the Trust's headquarters, Robert. In navy blazer, adorned with a modest Webwood pin. Steps to the podium. Voice shaky, yet resolute as he thanks donors, volunteers, and my granddaughter, whose stubborn code logic turned heartbreak into hardware for justice. A line that erupts the audience into applause. I blink back tears, but they slip anyway, streaking the contour I traced with concealer. And for one unguarded second, I sense the story resolving into symmetry: wrong made right, house turned haven, legacy restored when an aide whispers that a registered letter has arrived downstairs, bearing Mom's handwriting and a California postmark. And though part of me prays its closure, another part suspects fresh turbulence, because some chapters refuse a neat epilogue, and the envelope's weight in my palm feels heavier than paper, hinting the past may still have claims on the future we just unveiled. The elevator hums as I descend to the lobby, fingers skating over the latticework of possibilities sealed inside the envelope, each floor tick echoing my pulse. And by the time the doors part, I have rehearsed half a dozen reactions: anger, pity, indifference, yet the only thing I actually feel is a surgical curiosity. The same analytic itch that once drove me to reverse engineer malware for fun. And so I break the wax seal right there beside the reception desk, unfolding 4 handwritten pages whose ink tilts and jitters like a seismograph. Mom begins by cataloging sleepless nights, public shaming, yard sale humiliations, then pivots into a sermon on maternal instinct, claiming she stole not for greed, but to shield us from the terror of losing status. A confession that masquerades as contrition, but never quite bleeds. And while I read, I can almost hear her voice sliding into that precarious crescendo she used whenever morality threatened to bite. Yet the final paragraph veers: she has taken a job near Sacramento, counseling other at-risk families. She hopes one day I will speak to her again. And she encloses 2 Polaroids, one of Tyler, in a rehab garden, thin but smirking, the other of a tiny modular home, perched outside some sun-bleached trailer park, a caption beneath it, starting over. We finally know what matters. The sentence curls like smoke, refusing to dissipate, leaving me stranded between skepticism and an ache I don't want to name. A tension that lodges in the gap between heartbeats and refuses to budge, nudging me toward a choice I'm not sure I'm ready to confront. I carry the letter upstairs to Robert's office, where cedar dust floats in late afternoon sunbeams, and the half-built USS Constitution waits on its stand like a patient metaphor. He's sanding a mizzenmast spar, humming Glenn Miller, and I hand him the pages without comment, watching his brow flex as he reads, the set of his jaw shifting from wary to weary, until he finishes and folds the paper into a perfect square, placing it atop the blueprint as though filing it under unsolved. Then he looks at me. Really looks. Eyes sharp as the day he schooled me on dovetail joints and asks, "Can a heart forgive halfway and stay whole?" The question snaps open something raw because I realize every safeguard I've erected legal victories. Restitution checks, polished speeches cannot legislate what happens inside ventricles. And the notion that reconciliation might be a spectrum rather than a switch unsettles me in ways the courtroom never did, forcing me to admit that justice satisfied still leaves residues of loss, a residue that might harden into bitterness if left untended. Yet the alternative, turning the lock, one click toward mercy, feels like inviting entropy back into a house we just disinfected. And I hear myself promise Robert I will consider it. Knowing consideration is the most honest word I can muster. And he nods, as if the act of pondering is itself a form of courage, a notion that lingers between us like sawdust suspended in light, floating but unfallen, waiting to settle. That night, insomnia drags me to the living room window, city lights twinkling like circuit boards, and I play the Polaroids side by side on the sill, Tyler's half smile reflecting neon, the modular home looking fragile as origami. And I wonder whether absolution resembles code refactoring incremental, test-driven, or whether it's more like a hard reset where memory persists yet errors clear. Sarah, awakened by the glow, pads in with 2 mugs of chamomile, and I confess the letter's grip on me, expecting her to urge caution. But she surprises me by exploring the possibility of structured reconciliation, a phased protocol where boundaries and dialogue can coexist. And the product manager part of my brain lights up because protocol is language I understand. Yet the granddaughter part balks at the idea of installing version control on feelings, generating a paradox that keeps me rooted to the glass until dawn blurs the skyline and decision remains a variable still unsolved. Suspended in comment brackets, nudging me toward a compile I keep postponing. Weeks pass. The trust expands into Oregon. Apex Pay pilots secure payments for dementia patients. Momentum meeting mission in ways that validate every sleepless pivot. Yet the unopened thread of my mother's plea vibrates beneath the daily sprint. One Thursday, I'm speaking at a fintech summit when a question from the audience detonates my composure. A gray-haired woman asks how personal forgiveness factors into corporate ethics, and the room hushes as if someone hit mute. My rehearsed slide deck suddenly irrelevant against the royal under my sternum. So I answer off script, admitting I'm still A/B testing forgiveness. The phrase earning polite laughter, but inside me it detonates a private deadline. Indecision is itself a choice, and systems left idle decay. So after the keynote, I book a weekend flight to Sacramento, telling no one but Sarah and Robert, who both simply squeeze my hand as though understanding that some journeys require silence more than advice. A quiet that thickens while the departure board flips letters and the possibility of face-to-face honesty draws nearer with every flick. Sacramento's April sun feels foreign, too bright, too blunt, and the trailer park blinks like aluminum confetti in midday glare. I find Unit 7B, paint peeling, planter boxes hopeful with marigolds. And Mom opens the screen door before I can knock, as if she's been watching through the blinds for weeks. She looks smaller, winded by apologetic rehearsals, eyes ringed but earnest, and for a surreal minute we exchange logistics, traffic, weather, Tyler's progress until words run out and the gulf yawns wide. So I hand her a printed copy of the Trust's latest annual report, pages detailing how her restitution funds are backing legal victories across 3 states. She traces the bar graphs with trembling fingers, tears landing dark on the pie chart, and whispers, "At least something good grew," a sentence that slices through my armor. But rather than weaken, it seems to expose a hinge I can choose to oil or weld shut. And in that microsecond, I decide on oil. granting the door the slightest swing. Not wide, just enough for air and maybe conversation. A decision that surprises us both into silence. The kind thick with first steps. And as the sun tilts west, I realize we have not solved anything, but we have initiated handshake protocol. Packet sent, awaiting reply, and that is both terrifying and strangely, tentatively hopeful. A state of limbo I carry back to Seattle, like a live filament humming inside my carry-on, promising future sparks the story hasn't yet revealed. Story 2. I pulled onto the gravel drive at my Uncle Peter's house just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the pines. Feeling a flicker of hope at this year's reunion, I carried a wicker gift basket brimming with dark chocolate, artisan jam, and a bottle of 2018 Willamette Valley Pinot, my best attempt to say, I care without words. Inside, laughter and clinking glasses echoed down the wide hallway painted pale gray. But when I stepped through the doorway, the mood shifted like a winter gale. Heads turned, murmurs hushed, and the heavy scent of cinnamon rolls and pine filled my chest with unease. I smiled politely at my aunt, tried to ignore the way her eyes darted away, and made my way toward the dining room where the seating chart hand-lettered on cream cardstock hung like a wedding welcome sign. I studied the names arranged alphabetically by last, then blinked at the gap between Carpenter, Liam, and Carter. Michael. My name was gone. In its place, a thick black X had bled through the paper, as if someone had savored each stroke. Behind me, my brother's wife, Olivia, with her perfectly ironed blouse and Instagram-perfect hair, tipped a brow and sneered. Oh my God, you actually came. My mother, Susan, stood close by, her lips pursed like she was tasting sour grapes, and whispered low enough for half the room to hear. Just don't embarrass us this time. A hush fell over distant cousins, and even the cookie table seemed to recoil. I set the gift basket on the buffet, as if part of their display of family unity, then pivoted on my heel and walked out without a word. The screen door slammed behind me like a judge's gavel, and I could swear I heard laughter rebound off the walls. As I slid into my car, laughter that morphed into feigned concern just minutes later, when overdraft notices and bounce check alerts began pinging into their phones. I didn't wait for the phone calls or the panicked group chat messages. I had already locked down every shared account they'd abused for years' utilities, the joint Netflix login, the emergency fund I'd quietly curated. 15 minutes after I left, their phones lit up in chaos, and a knock sounded at my parents' front door, waves of confusion rippling through their carefully choreographed lives. They begged for answers, but I stayed silent, watching their frantic messages pile up without reply. I wasn't being petty or dramatic. I was drawing a line they'd spent decades erasing me behind. As the sun set on that first day of their panic, I realized this was only the beginning of a reckoning they could never have imagined. I pulled onto Uncle Peter's gravel drive, just as the late afternoon sun slipped behind the pines. The wicker basket of dark chocolate, artisan jam, and a fine Willamette Valley Pinot cradled against my hip like a peace offering. I took a deep breath before stepping inside the pale gray farmhouse, expecting warmth and laughter only to be met with a sudden hush and shifting eyes. In the dining room, a hand-lettered seating chart hung like a bridal announcement. I scanned the names, heart stuttering when Carter. Elizabeth was nowhere to be found. In its place, someone had drawn a jagged X, the ink bleeding through the cardstock as if they'd taken pleasure in each deliberate stroke. Behind me, Olivia, my brother's perfectly coiffed wife, snorted. Oh, you actually came. My mother's voice dropped so that half the room could hear. Just don't embarrass us this time. Their laughter tickled my spine like ice. I placed the gift basket atop the buffet, turned, and walked out without a word, The screen doors slam, echoing like a verdict. I slid into my car, hands trembling, knowing that their comfortable facade depended on my quiet compliance, and I was done. I unlocked my phone and, with calculated calm, froze every shared account utilities they never paid, the joint Netflix they abused, the emergency fund I'd built with my own paycheck, 6 months of mortgage buffers, grocery backups, and surprise car repairs all vanished from their grasp in a few taps. 15 minutes later, my name pinged across their group chat in panicked flurry. "Hey, why is the power off? Our Netflix won't load, Liz. Are you there?" I stayed silent, watching their panic bloom like a dark flower. That evening, their attempts to reach me swelled voicemails of confusion. Texts swinging from curiosity to outright blame, but I refused to respond. They didn't realize they'd spent years treating me like an afterthought, a safety net they could tug whenever life got messy. When overdraft notices began cascading into their shared email, when the $600 salon charge refused to go through, I felt an odd satisfaction. Their entitlement had been a slow poison. Now they tasted its bitterness firsthand. On day 3, my aunt sent a placating text. "Can we please talk?" But I'd already filed formal notices with my attorney. Every screenshot of unauthorized charges, every bank statement, every evidence-laden email was ready for mediation. They thought I'd walked away. I'd merely drawn the line. When I forwarded the legal cease and desist to the entire family thread, the chat emptied one by one. Their silence was louder than any apology could be. 2 weeks later, life felt unrecognizable and mercifully free. I rented a small downtown apartment, fewer obligations, no hidden bills or whispered judgments. I kept one message, a single line from my cousin, the only one who dared to ask if I was okay. I replied, "I'm finally home." Outside my window, city lights flickered like fresh possibilities, and I realized I'd traded a lifetime of fixing broken bonds for the quiet strength of boundaries. And I wouldn't go back. I pulled into my cousin's gravel driveway, the late summer sun low and red, a wicker basket of fine cheeses, and a vintage rosé cradled in my arms. I'd rehearsed my smile all morning, imagining warm embraces and laughter echoing in the old farmhouse. Instead, the air went still the moment I stepped onto the crooked porch, and through the open doorway I saw it, a hand-lettered seating chart hanging just inside the hall. Carter. Emily scratched off in angry black strokes, the paper curling at the edges as though it, too, felt the rejection. I set down the basket by a wooden side table and felt my pulse ratchet up when I heard my brother's wife, Loretta, snort from the dining room. "Oh, you actually came." Their laughter rippled behind me. My mother's voice, low but vicious, drifted through the hall. "Just try not to ruin everything." I turned without a word, the picture of calm terror, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor as I walked out, the screen door slamming behind me like a gavel. I slid into my car, hands trembling, the basket forgotten on the porch, and realized then that I'd given too much for too long. Back home, I sank onto the couch and unlocked my phone, each swipe a quiet resolution. I froze the shared checking account they'd rated for family vacations, Netflix subscriptions, and Mom's salon tabs. I revoked their PayPal access. They'd thought it was their personal ATM. Each tap felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost in their entitlement. I left my own line of credit untouched, but withdrew the mortgage buffer I'd set up just in case. By the time the sun set, their financial lifelines lay severed, and I waited for the fallout. The next morning, their panic arrived by email and text. What happened to the rent deposit? Why was the power off? My phone buzzed with voicemails escalating from confusion to accusation. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the messages pile up, the undertow of guilt they tried to cast slipping through my fingers. They'd always relied on me to smooth over conflicts, cover mistakes, bail them out until now. Their world was wobbling on its axis, and I felt neither regret nor triumph, just the strange calm of someone finally standing still. On day 3, my Aunt Gloria texted, "Can we please talk?" But I'd already spoken through screens and transfers and locked doors. I'd engaged a lawyer, prepared documentation of every unauthorized charge, every whispered lie that dismissed me as too sensitive. When I forwarded the formal notice to the entire family, chat receipts attached, timelines outlined, the chat went silent, one by one. Their names disappeared from the group thread, leaving only the echo of my own resolve. Weeks later, I moved into a small downtown apartment, no secret passwords, no hidden bills, no haunted obligations. I kept one connection open, a message from my cousin Tom, the only one who dared to ask if I was okay. I replied, finally free. Outside my window, the city lights flickered to life, each one a promise of new beginnings. I realized then that cutting ties hadn't severed me from love, but taught me its true cost, and that for the first time. I was ready to rebuild on my own terms. I woke before dawn, windows dark where my childhood home once gleamed with holiday lights, and found the silence in my new apartment almost unbearable. For weeks I'd watched the family's frantic voicemails pile up, my mother's faux concern, my brother's angry question marks, Aunt Gloria's desperate, "Can we talk?" and then nothing. No more texts about overdue salon appointments, no more group chat notifications begging for Netflix passwords, just a quiet void where their entitlement once buzzed. I realized in that hour before sunrise that I hadn't felt this untethered since college, no one's drama pulling at my edges, no whispered demands framing me as the sensitive one or the go-to fixer. Licensing my own boundaries had felt like ripping away a safety net, but now the emptiness I feared revealed itself as space to breathe, to think, to exist on my own terms, and even as a flicker of loneliness stirred, I knew it was a sacrifice I would never undo. By mid-morning, my cousin Tom, my one quiet ally, knocked on the door bearing a pepperoni pizza and 2 cups of black coffee. He didn't ask for details, just slid a pizza box onto my kitchen island and said, "You okay?" The simple question cracked something open. I nodded, voice catching as I told him I was fine, and he let me speak until the words fell away. "You always held us together." He said gently. "We never knew how much until you let go." I stared at the condensation ring under my coffee cup and realized this wasn't just about money or passwords, it was about respect. Tom's presence felt like a lifeline thrown across the chasm I'd created. But as he patted my shoulder and left, I recognized that rebuilding my sense of self wouldn't come from mending old wounds so much as from forging new connections. The urge to rebuild was stronger than any grudge, and for the first time in years, I felt the pull of possibility. That evening I stood by the window, city lights reflecting off my laptop screen, drafting a message to my parents that I never sent. Instead, I closed the document and opened a blank note. "Dear Emily's subscribers." My finger hovered over the keys, heart pounding with the same mix of fear and exhilaration I'd felt when I first planned this channel. I wasn't done telling my story, I was just getting started. Tomorrow, I decided, I would respond to my father's voicemail requesting lunch, not to beg forgiveness, but to see if the man who'd once entrusted me with the family's finances could hear me now. Whether that call would close the vault forever, or swing open one last door, was a choice I'd make on my own terms, and that decision would mark the true beginning of my next chapter. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in front of the old house on Maple Drive, the one I'd spent countless summers crashing on its front lawn with cousins. Now every clapboard was dull, the windows dark behind drawn blinds. I'd driven past it every day, resisting the urge to knock, but today curiosity won. When I tried the doorknob, it rattled in a locked cylinder. The silence felt sharp, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I leaned forward to peer through the dusty glass, no flicker of movement, no sign of life, only my own reflection and the echo of the laughter that used to spill from inside. I let out a slow breath, the weight of abandonment settling cold in my chest, and wondered how a place once brimming with family could feel so empty. The next morning, a text from my cousin Emma arrived. "Mom and Dad are trying to reach you. House is getting cited for code violations. Water shut off next week." I leaned back in my chair, coffee growing cold beside me, and felt an odd sense of calm. I hadn't intended to ruin their lives. I merely stopped patching the holes they'd drilled in my trust. Now they were forced to face the consequences of their entitlement. But watching them struggle with broken boilers and dark hallways didn't bring me joy, only relief that the single thread binding me to that home had finally snapped. Still, as I locked the front door of my apartment behind me and headed out, I couldn't shake the question, would they ever learn to fix things themselves? Later that afternoon, I discovered a small envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a trembling note from Aunt Gloria. "I'm sorry for what happened. We thought you'd never leave. Please forgive us." Her handwriting spidery, uncertain, spoke of shame rather than entitlement. My heart stuttered reading it, torn between the urge to rip it up and a flicker of empathy. Was this genuine remorse? Or another calculated move? I stared at the blank page on my desk, cursor blinking. As I considered typing a reply, forgiveness felt like returning to a battlefield lined with landmines, and yet the possibility of reconciliation real. Cautious hovered at the edges of my resolve. That evening, I took refuge in a tiny corner coffee shop, a new favorite tucked beneath an old brick building downtown. The barista knew me by name, slid a caramel latte across the counter without a charge, and asked. "Rough week," I nodded, surprised by how easily the words spilled family fallout. She placed a gentle hand on mine, a gesture of solidarity I hadn't realized I needed. Around me, strangers chatted softly, phones hovered, laptops glowed, a quiet microcosm of normal life. For the first time, I felt woven into something warm and unpredictable, free from obligations laid on me at birth. And as the steam curled above my mug, I wondered if this unplanned community could become more than refuge. Before closing time, I checked my phone and saw a voicemail from my father. My finger hovered over play as the shop emptied around me. I closed my eyes and pressed the button. His voice, worn and soft, said, "I don't expect you back at the reunion hall. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you. No matter what, call me when you're ready." My chest tightened with a swirl of emotion, relief, hesitation, grief, hope. I turned off the recording and stepped into the cool night air, the streetlights flickering like distant memories. Ahead, my path was lit only by my own resolve, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to choose each step. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It's walking forward on your own terms. Story 3. Emily's heart sank the day she overheard her parents rushing to bail out her sister Chloe, who'd spiraled deep into debt, chasing designer handbags and weekend getaways she couldn't afford. They emptied their retirement fund overnight, framing it as a family emergency, and thanked Chloe for teaching them compassion. A month later, when Emily quietly asked for help covering her surgery, a procedure she'd postponed until the pain became unbearable, her father sighed. "She has a future. You're just a burden." And her mother added, "We can't save you both." Emily nodded, clipped a calm, "Thanks for the clarity," and slipped away into a sudden, eerie freedom. In the weeks that followed, Emily stopped checking her phone for missed calls and stopped sending upbeat updates. without a safety net. Every step felt precarious, yet liberating. She scoured online grants, negotiated hospital payment plans, and sold her beloved camera gear, rare design books, even the antique writing desk she'd inherited. Each sale stung, yet filled her with a fierce resolve she would not beg for scraps of sympathy or money she'd already earned, with long nights and side gigs. By the time December frost coated her Seattle balcony, Emily had cobbled together enough to book her surgery herself. She navigated hospital corridors alone, silent tears steeling her for a grueling recovery. At home, her roommate offered tea and asked if she needed anything, but Emily shook her head. This pain was hers to own, this triumph hers alone, in the solitude of her recovery. She sketched wireframes and mock-ups on her laptop, memories of underpaid freelance work igniting a thought her passion for design deserved more than second-rate client gigs. As her bandaged arm grew stronger, Emily overhauled her online portfolio. She rebranded her UX/UI studio, upgraded her website, and cold emailed local startups. Within days, a tech nonprofit offered her a small project and paid her more than she'd earned in a month. Another lead followed, then a $5,000 contract that covered her rent for 2 months. Her bank balance swelled, her belief in herself solidified. Yet, through it all, her family remained silent. Their group chats empty, their calls unanswered. Emily realized their indifference spoke louder than any rejection. Then, 3 months after surgery, she opened her inbox to find an opportunity that felt like a gift. A major e-commerce brand sought a complete UX overhaul and remote partnership. The contract promised a 6-figure retainer, proof that her value wasn't defined by broken promises or family politics. Emily signed on the dotted line, heart racing. She sat back, fingers poised above her phone, knowing she now held the power to make her family notice, not with anger or revenge, but through undeniable success that would echo louder than any plea for help. Emily woke on the morning after her surgery with a swollen bandage taped to her side and a resolve sharper than any scalpel. She navigated the hospital's financial office alone, clutching folders of grant applications and income statements, while hospital staff eyed her with polite sympathy. Back in her small lease apartment, she spent every free minute scouring online portals for medical assistance programs specific to chronic conditions. When those ran dry, she listed her prized vintage camera lens on eBay, then the leather sketchbook she'd used since art school. Each sale stung memories traded for survival, but with every PayPal notification, her panic receded slightly. Nights found her hunched over her laptop, wireframing a client's landing page with one good arm and icing the other. She stopped expecting anyone to rescue her. The only lifeline was her own 2 hands and the code she'd learned at 14. As painkillers blurred the edges of discomfort, Emily channeled the attendant aches into creativity. She rewrote her portfolio site on a template of confidence, showcasing case studies with crisp visuals and clear metrics. Unsolicited, she pitched a local nonprofit that had once paid her a modest fee for holiday graphics. This time, she proposed a full UX redesign with measurable impact. The reply arrived at midnight. "Let's talk budget." When the nonprofit's $4,200 check hit her account, she let herself a small, triumphant smile before plunging back into work. One project led to another. An artisanal coffee roaster needed a mobile mock-up. A boutique gym asked for web refresh, and her PayPal balance began climbing beyond rent and bills into something she dared label savings. Still, through every milestone and every little victory, her family's group chat remained an empty void, a silent echo reminding her that she'd built this without their pity or their loans. By February, Emily's design boutique, Eva Carter Creative, had enough momentum to attract a stealthy pitch to a Seattle fintech startup. She spent a Sunday drafting a slide deck that walked them through pain points, proposed solutions, and projected ROI, then hit send with a prayer. 2 days later, her inbox chimed with a subject line reading, "Partnership Proposal." Within 48 hours, she'd negotiated a $27,500 retainer for a 3-month overhaul of their customer portal, nearly triple her previous monthly revenue. When that deposit cleared, she upgraded her aging laptop to a fast MacBook Pro, added a second monitor, and ordered ergonomic office gear to replace her wobbly folding table. The financial cushion felt surreal. More surprising was how it reshaped her inner landscape. No longer burdened by scarcity, she felt a burgeoning calm, a conviction that her worth was neither measured by family approval nor by anyone's willingness to bail her out. And then came the email that would change everything, an invitation from a national e-commerce brand to lead their UX revamp on a 6-figure contract. Emily stared at the screen, breath catching as the gravity of the opportunity settled in. This wasn't just another freelance gig. It was proof that her skills commanded respect and substantial compensation in a competitive market. Her fingers hovered over the accept button as Seattle's early spring light filtered through her window. The promise of bright days ahead mirrored in the new growth on her balcony planter. With the click, she sealed her transition from family burden to a sought-after professional. Yet, before she drafted her acceptance email, she paused to consider her next move. Would she finally tell her parents, or let her success speak for itself? The choice loomed like a crossroads, every path leading to an irrevocable shift in the story of Emily Carter. Emily clicked accept on the 6-figure UX overhaul contract and watched the confirmation email land in her inbox, the subject line glowing like a beacon. "Welcome aboard, Emily Carter." Her fingers trembled as she savored that moment, proof that her talent, not her family ties, had earned her this breakthrough. By dusk, she'd swapped out her folding table for a sleek standing desk, arranged fresh plants by her second monitor, and poured herself a celebratory glass of sparkling water. The hum of her new MacBook Pro felt like a chorus of possibility. Yet, as she scanned the quiet apartment around her, a familiar question whispered in her mind, would she finally let her parents know she'd not only survived, but thrived? The next morning, Emily drafted a single LinkedIn post, a minimalist photo of her upgraded workspace. Captioned, "Honored to lead at Commerce Co's UX revamp. Here's to turning challenges into opportunities." She hit share and leaned back, heart pounding. For the first hour, nothing happened but the hum of the refrigerator. Then her phone buzzed a notification from her cousin. "Aaron saw your post." "Damn, sis, congrats." Moments later, a friend from design school slid into her DMs, and her inbox pinged with recruitment messages. Emily smiled at the flood of professional recognition, but her family's group chat remained ominously silent, the absence of those she once relied on echoing louder than any praise. By Friday evening, Emily's phone lit up with her first family text in months. "We saw your post. Call us when you can." She also found a voicemail from her mother, Emily. "Honey, we're proud of you. Please just talk." Chloe's number appeared next with a curt, "You earned it." Emily, "Weird, but okay." Daniel pinged a gif of confetti. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the old swirl of guilt and betrayal threaten to surface, but this time, she recognized the pattern. Their sudden interest had nothing to do with her well-being and everything to do with their own discomfort. Yet, beneath it all, she sensed their desperation. Her success had crumbled their illusion of control. She set the phone aside, determined to decide on her own terms whether she'd bridge the gap or let the silence hold. That night, Emily wrote 3 short, firm replies, one to Aaron. "Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm good." One to Chloe. "Glad you noticed. Hope you're well." And one to Mom and Dad I'll call Sunday afternoon. Then she drafted a letter, a concise summary of her journey from their refusal to help through solo surgeries, late-night design sprints, and ultimate triumph. She printed it, folded it into an elegant envelope, and sealed it. Whether they opened it or tossed it aside, Emily felt the weight lift from her shoulders. As she placed it on her entryway table, she realized this final act of clarity would set the stage for the holiday gathering looming in 2 weeks, a crossroads where past hurts and new strengths would collide once more. 2 weeks later, Emily drove through her old neighborhood under a slate-gray sky, the envelope burning a promise in her coat pocket. Christmas lights glimmered in manicured yards, each house a reflection of the family she'd left behind, perfect facades concealing messy realities. She parked at her parents' curb and smoothed her coat, rehearsing the words she'd written, the truth, concise and calm. The front door opened before she could knock. Margaret's pale face hovered in the frame, eyes wide with tentative hope. "I got your note," Mom whispered, voice trembling. Emily nodded and stepped inside, the familiar scent of pine and cinnamon mingling with an undercurrent of tension. Every footstep through the hallway felt like crossing a fault line. And at the dining table, her father and siblings formed a half-circle of curiosity and guilt. Emily placed the envelope in front of them and sat back, heart pounding as silence stretched between past wounds and this long-overdue reckoning. Margaret unfolded the letter first, her fingers shaking so badly the paper crinkled. She read each line, her face flickering from confusion to shame, then to flickers of tears. Chloe hovered behind her chair, arms crossed, jaw clenched like a wounded animal. Daniel sat quietly, studying Emily with an unreadable expression. Finally, Mom looked up, eyes moist. I had no idea you felt so alone," she said, voice catching. Emily's throat tightened, but she held her gaze steady. "You chose not to see me," she replied softly. "This isn't about money. It's about respect." Chloe opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, and Emily knew the moment had shifted. But whether it would heal or shatter them further depended on what came next. A crackling phone interrupted the hush, Daniel's voice on speaker, stilted as he explained his partner's urgent need at the office. He ended the call with a terse, "I have to go," rose from the table, and muttered a hasty apology before stalking out. Chloe followed him into the entryway, her silhouette tense against the frosted glass. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, watching them through the flimsy partitions of family ritual. Margaret reached across the table for Emily's hand, but Emily hesitated and let it hover. She could feel the old pull of loyalty and pity, but also the fierce pulse of her own worth. "Thank you for reading," she said, softly but with steel in her voice. Then she stood, shoulders squared, and turned toward the door, leaving them to decide whether to call her back or let her go for good. Outside, the air bit at her cheeks as she pulled on her gloves. She glanced back at the frosted windows, expecting someone to sprint after her, voice begging for mercy or understanding. But the house remained dark and silent, the stained glass of the front door gleaming like a barrier. In her pocket, her phone buzzed a text from Aaron Hartz. "Proud of you." She pressed her thumb to reply, then stopped. This moment, this cold clarity, was hers alone. She didn't need to explain, negotiate, or argue. She slid into her car, the engine's hum a steady heartbeat of possibility. Ahead lay her newly signed 6-figure contract, her thriving design business, and a life rebuilt on her own terms. Behind her lay the echoes of promises broken and boundaries drawn in pen. By New Year's Eve, Emily's home office was transformed into a mini creative studio twinkling fairy lights, a fresh sprig of holly over her monitor, and a half-empty bottle of bubbly chilling in a silver bucket. At midnight, she toasted to herself no family gathering, No awkward small talk, just the woman in the mirror who had fought through surgery, debt, and indifference to claim her worth. The screen glowed with a message from a new client, a startup asking for an urgent redesign. Emily smiled, lifted her glass, and whispered, "Here's to 2026, the year I stop asking permission." As the fireworks crackled outside her window, she felt a quiet thrill. The future belonged to her. And for once, she knew exactly who she was, unapologetically, undeniably. Emily Carter. Months passed. After Emily slid that sealed envelope across the Carter dining table and walked out into the cold December night. And the silence that followed settled like fresh, steady quiet, unyielding, cleansing. She poured herself into her work, leading the Commerce Co. UX revamp through its final sprint, then took a rare weekend off to tour condominiums in Capitol Hill. When she signed the papers on her first property, an airy one-bedroom with skyline views, it felt like planting a flag on her independence. Yet each time her phone buzzed with a notification from home, her heart clenched, wondering if this new address would ever host more than her own echoing footsteps. By spring, Emily's calendar overflowed with speaking engagements and freelance contracts, and she found herself on stage at Design Forward, sharing her story of surgery, sobriety of spirit, and self-made success. The applause was warm, but the validation she craved came later that night when a former mentor DM'd, "You've come so far, proud of you." Emily smiled at the glow of her laptop screen, then flicked open Instagram to find Chloe's feed, still curated in pastel perfection, expensive brunches, European vacations paid by mom and dad, and subtle jabs about sacrifices made. For a moment, Emily's chest tightened with old resentment, then relaxed with certainty her life would no longer spin around their performance of happiness. In mid-year, she quietly launched Brightline Collective, a mentorship network for young designers who'd been overlooked or underpaid. Her invitation-only pilot cohort grew to 30 members in weeks, each mentee drawn by Emily's reputation for turning adversity into opportunity. Aaron, her cousin, who'd once sat silently beside her at Chloe's excesses, emailed to say Brightline had already changed his career trajectory. Emily poured a glass of wine in her new kitchen and watched twilight slip across the Puget Sound, thinking of her mother's soft voice. "We're proud. When you call." She hovered her finger over the phone, then set it down. Some bridges needed to burn before they could be rebuilt. Then, one humid July afternoon, her phone lit up with a single text from an unknown number. "I'd like to meet." No one else. It was Mom. Emily's heart thudded so loud, she paused her video call with a client. She stared at the message. Was it an olive branch or another performance? She booked a table at a quiet cafe on Beacon Hill and sent back, Sunday, noon, the morning of the meeting. She dressed in her posture tentative. Before Emily could choose her words, Mom reached into her purse and placed a folded paper on the table. Emily felt the old ache of being unseen, unvalued flare in her chest. But as she drew a steadying breath and met her mother's gaze, she realized that no matter what came next, she would speak her truth without apology. Closing the space between them felt like stepping onto a new path, one neither forgiveness nor reconciliation could define, until it was truly earned.